A lot of owners refer to horses as easy keepers.
Yep.
At what point does that term become like a red flag?
About 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. It's about 10 years ago when we recognized that easy keepers probably had a problem with regulation of insulin.
Okay, so someone's listening to this podcast and they're going, cool guys, so what can I do?
The first thing you have to recognize is your horse overweight. Does it look like it's overweight?
Many horse owners have heard the phrase easy keeper. A horse who gains weight easily or seems to thrive on very little feed. But that label can be a warning sign. More horses today are developing metabolic issues, increasing the risk of laminitis, often from gradual changes that are easy to miss. In this episode of Dear Horse World, equine veterinarian Dr. Kent Tooman explains what's happening inside the horse's body, how insulin is involved, and the practical steps owners can take to reduce risk. Recording on site at Pegasus Equine Training and Rehabilitation, here is Dr. Kent Tooman.
Dear Horse World, it's Dr. Kent Tooman.
Kent, welcome to the Dear Horse World podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Okay, so we're here at Pegasus Equine Training in Redmond.
Yep.
I'm super stoked to have you here on the podcast.
Yep.
Before we dive in, and I'm really excited because obviously I have a ton of personal context, which we're going to dive into about what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
But why don't you give everyone a little bit of a background on your journey as a vet? Like, you know, how you got to where you are as a vet and why you chose vet medicine. I mean, this is always a question I want to ask vets.
Yeah.
Because like we talked about, again, before we pressed record, like vet medicine, being a veterinarian is like choosing to climb the professional Everest versus being like, I might just go like sit down by the lake. Like it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Vet medicine, you know, everybody who's listening, if you don't know this, like one of the things that I can say without a doubt, stand up in front of a podium of 1 million people and say, vet medicine is you sign up for it's a hard job. Mentally, physically, emotionally.
Yeah, but who doesn't have a hard job? You know? Yeah. You know, I think a lot of people have a bit of a misconception about being a veterinarian because sometimes I think we get too much credit. Maybe it's because I've been in the business for so long, 30 some years now. But yeah, it's you have to be committed. It is quite competitive to get into veterinary schools, but it's also competitive to be a firefighter. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, it's very much statistical. You'll hear people say all the time, well, it's harder to get into vet school than it is into medical school. That's because there's more medical schools. So there's the same amount of people applying for far fewer positions in veterinary school. And the admission processes are weird. So at any rate, long story short, I'm one of the luckiest people on the planet. So I got to be a cowboy as my summer job when I was a kid in Hawaii. So you can't do much better than that. So when I had summer vacations, I worked on an absolutely gorgeous ranch and on the Big Island. Wow. And I got to ride horses and chase cattle, fixed a lot of fences, dug a lot of holes as well. Yeah. But that was pretty cool. One of my favorite stories is by the time I was in vet school, I was still coming back and working on that ranch. Occasionally we would move the cattle on the main roads and the tourists would have to pull aside and they would stop and they would be taking pictures like crazy, which is understandable. You have this huge herd of Hereford cattle going down the main road and you have about 6 or 8 Paneolos or Hawaiian cowboys in the back. So they would gently talk to me, kind of talking slowly because they thought I was local and I would speak in this kind of this dialect of Pidgin, which I did deliberately to talk to them. And then they would leave thinking they had had this local experience where they had talked to a native person. whereas they had no idea that I was probably far more educated than they were.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it was kind of a fun story. But that's where I got first my tiger mom, like you had mentioned.
Yes, tiger moms.
Tiger moms, Asian moms. We're famous for having tiger moms. But she wanted us to commit to something when we were very young. So my brother committed to being an architect, and he became an architect. I committed to being a veterinarian at about 11 or 12 from reading All Creatures Great and Small, James Herriot books.
No.
That's right. I read them all, like 11, 12 years old, and I thought...
One of great literature. Like, I can't
Yep.
believe James Herriot is your inspiration.
Who was a beautiful writer.
Beautiful writer.
And...
everybody who's listening or watching, if you haven't read All Creatures Great and Small by James Herriot, like, oh my God.
Brilliant writing, brilliant storytelling. And it definitely motivated me. I'm like, this was awesome. This is exactly what I want to do. So I had committed to that. And then I ended up working on the ranches and such. I also had an English teacher who had a veterinarian in town, and I went and volunteered there. And then I went to college. I went to college at Colorado College, which is a small liberal arts school in Colorado Springs. And then I got into the Ohio State University for vet school. And then I went back to Hawaii to practice for about 3-4 years. I came to the racetrack here for about 3-4 years, and then I started my own practice, and that's been for about 20-some years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm so excited because we're going to get to talk a little bit about, we're going to talk a lot, not a little bit, a lot.
Okay.
About metabolic conditions within horses.
Yeah.
Because something you said to me, and I want you to kind of expand on it, something you said to me, and we'll kind of go into a little bit about like my context, is you said you're seeing more issues with metabolic horses and laminitis than you did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. I want you to like really dive into that for everybody.
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with recognition of the problem. So equine metabolic syndrome hasn't even been recognized for probably since the last 10, 15 years.
Really?
Diagnosed as a syndrome. Something that was recognizable, that could be duplicated, that could be pursued. So it's only been around for about 15 years. So I think a lot of it has to do with not recognizing that the horse had a metabolic endocrine problems, which is very common, which often resulted in laminitis or other problems. And so I think part of it is recognition. The other part of it is that horses, I think, are mimicking our human population. So our human population is generally overweight and doesn't exercise a lot. And that kind of reflects on what happens with our horses. So our horses are getting overweight. Our cats, our dogs, they're all happening the same thing.
Totally.
They're getting overweight and they're exercising less. And we have all kinds of problems with that. Cats, we have the same problems as cats, goats, dogs, humans. We have very similar problems. In horses, that kind of translates into what we call now is equine metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance, or which now properly termed insulin dysregulation. And it has to do, it's very similar to diabetes or diabetes type 2. It's fairly complex into how it's not exactly like diabetes type 2, but it's most easily recognized as similar. Yeah.
And so that reference, when people say that, because I've explained that to a few people who are like, what is equine metabolic syndrome? And I said, well, imagine it just like type 2 diabetes in horses.
Yep.
So that is a good reference for people to use. Like, and would you say like it's a rough comparison?
That's correct. It's not technically identical, but it's the best way to understand it. Yeah. And basically the system is not, the insulin is not doing what it's supposed to do in the body.
What is insulin supposed to do?
Insulin is basically supposed to clear glucose from your body. So it's supposed to get sugar through your kidneys and out the system so that it doesn't store into the body, which results in fat, which results in inflammation and deposits, problems with your heart in terms of plaques, in terms of cholesterol, those kind of things.
Okay.
So insulin's job is to get glucose working and out of there so it doesn't deposit fats into your liver, in horses it'd be up in
the crusty neck.
The crusty neck, everywhere. So the ribs, up on the those things, the withers and the hind end, those kind of things.
Well, and do you find, so this is something that I've observed, is that this is true. Horses also, their fat deposits or where fat is concentrated is unique to each horse. So sometimes I think people, like traditionally we've thought, okay, horses just get a really big belly.
Yep.
But then in Ginger's case, that's not so much the case, actually.
Yep.
She actually maintains a fairly normal profile. But then when upon closer examination, you have those armpit pockets, you have the shoulder pockets, you have the crusty neck. And depending on the breed, it might be like, oh, like I really noticed this on the road when I've seen lots of different horses. It's people, oh, like look, that crusty, chunky neck. And now with a more educated eye, I'm like, no, that's not crusty like good top line. That's like crusty like is in fat. And horses carry their fat differently. So some might not look as obese as like Bella. Bella looked, because, in some horses, their conformation, they're going to carry more fat in certain places. So it's going to be visually more obvious. So what are some things that people can look for what are some myths that we can bust here about the physical presentation of equine metabolic syndrome?
Most of the myths are actually fairly accurate. So, there is what's called body condition score on a horse. You can look it up and it's fairly simple. It's deliberately between 0 and 9 so that you can't have the perfect body score, right? Of course, some people go say 4.5. But so, and that's exactly what you look for. You look for specific deposits of fat, the crest, the withers, the ribs, the trunk, the tail head, and then there's a few other spots. But those are the dorsum as well. But those are specifically the spots that you look for, and that's how you grade the horses. And so grossly obese horse, and we see them, would be a 9, and then an extremely starved horse would be a 1. And then the ideal is you want the horse to be a little bit underweight than overweight.
Okay, so, why is that?
So just the same thing as people is just physically more strain and stress on the ligaments, tendons, and joints. And then the more fat you have, the more risk you are of becoming insulin resistant. So they do go hand in hand. So if you have more fat, you have a better chance of becoming insulin resistant. It's a fairly complex mechanism as how it works, and they're still in the process of understanding it. But we do know that the more obese you are, the more problems you have. The more problems you have with your kidneys, the more problems you have with your liver, the more problems you have with a whole variety of your heart, etc. So,
and this is because of glucose.
It's because of how the body processes glucose. It's all about they call it non-structural carbohydrates. So it's sugars. It's sugars and starches basically is what it is. So. And if the body doesn't process it, then it stores it. If it doesn't eliminate it, it stores it, and then you start to have problems.
So to give everyone context, you and I met because I adopted 2 ponies who were the fattest ponies I've ever seen in my life. And to give everyone context, I didn't have any experience with equine metabolic syndrome. There are other things that I had navigated with other horses, but obesity and equine metabolic syndrome was not one of those things that I had navigated in my journey so far with different horses. So I feel like I navigated barn blindness, and that was a whole thing. So I want to kind of talk to you about that, because I feel like when I got them, I was like, when they became in my care and I was responsible for them, I feel like my perspective on their condition became almost normalized, And so I want to talk about that because I really see that.
Yep.
And especially in the Pacific Northwest and certain parts of the world
Yep.
where the environment is not actually helping us monitor our horse's weight the way that it might be in other parts of the world.
Yep.
I really noticed, and it was like, I was almost embarrassed by this because I was someone who had taken great pride in not having overweight horses.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I actually have found, if I were to be completely objective, I have actually found myself completely a victim to barn blindness. So for everyone who's listening who doesn't know what that is, in your experience professionally, what is barn blindness?
Well, you tell me.
Okay, well, from my perspective, barn blindness is when you look at a horse, you see a horse every day, so their condition or I think their physical condition, I think barn blindness specifically refers to the physical condition more than anything, becomes like normalized, and maybe action or concern becomes maybe like dulled over because you just see them every day. And this, I think, applies to lots of different things, right? Like people refer to this as, I think this is like an actual psychological effect that most people suffer from, even when it comes to like the improvements you make in your career, your children, all those kind of things.
Your home.
It's this idea that if you see something or someone every single day, you're not going to notice the differences in the way that you might if you were to not see them for a long period of time.
Yep.
So I think that's something that we're battling, because I notice that when I compare horses across different geographical areas, I do see a significant difference in sort of the average weight or the average body score, right? Like horses in Nevada or Idaho are going to be more in that 4 or 5 range, or maybe even a 3, because the environment is playing a big part in that.
More barren,
Whereas where we are here in the Pacific Northwest, the grass is lush, the temperature doesn't drop very extreme, right? Like just things are just genuinely a bit more comfortable.
You also have breed difference and variation, right? So certain breeds just automatically look larger. And this is, if we're talking about metabolic syndrome, it all stems from horses they call them thrifty horses. So these are horses that survived, generally like ponies, Arabs, some of the draft crosses. These are horses that were developed or evolved to survive in tough environments. So their bodies became naturally preserved fat. Because they would go through times when they wouldn't have a lot of forage, and so they had to rely on that. So what's happened is we've developed these breeds, Icelandic breeds, for instance. We see halflingers, some of those larger breeds.
The fjords.
The fjords. Fjords are pretty classic for this disorder. But they're made to work hard and work in tough environments where they didn't have a ton of protein coming in. And so those horses, but of course now we've bred them and we've adopted them and we've domesticated them. We use them for other purposes, and they do have a better chance of having the metabolic syndrome.
Okay, so let's list Arabs, and I remember this because the vet that I was working with before we brought the horses down here to Washington, they were like, you have adopted horses that are like predisposed, like are basically you have to be on a diet for the rest of their lives. Which is Arabs, ponies, both minis, and like in our case, we've got Bella and Ginger here who are New Forest ponies, who, again, these are common. So this concept of like evolving in environments where it's essentially like it's like a purge and a starve, right? It's basically they eat when they can for the months in which the seasonal vegetation is available, and then they basically burn all that off in like essentially like a concept of starvation.
Absolutely,
right,
100%.
And we can't recreate that.
Correct.
In domestication.
And instead, we're feeding them like crazy.
Right.
And where they're not getting near the exercise that they would have in their natural environment. Plus, we're breeding them like crazy. And we're breeding them for traits that we like, not necessarily traits that are healthy for the horse. So, and we can get a new generation every year. So if you look at people, for instance, we're getting new generation every 20 or 30 years. Whereas horses, you can get a new generation every year. So you can, and we're not breeding for traits other than looks and athletic ability, essentially. And so we're breeding in all of these traits that are we run into problems with, specifically like we're talking about. But we don't breed for good feet. We don't breed for good teeth. We don't breed for good immune systems. We don't breed for those things. We breed for speed, athleticism, and looks. Yeah.
So this is where, like, you could argue that the commercialization of horses is in fact deeply and directly affecting the health of the species.
Oh yeah. And we're responsible now for taking care of them because we've created a creature that literally needs us to take care of them.
Oh, say that again. I want you to say that again.
Yeah. We've created an animal that now is so domesticated that we are actually required to take care of them now.
So do you think the species, horses as a species, the ones that we see in domestication, are in fact really and I'm going to agree with you on this because I can compare, everyone who's listening to this podcast knows my mare Lady spent most of her life. That was a much more as close to natural evolution.
Yep.
Her line was she's spent most of her life feral.
Yep.
Her parents would have been the horses that survived the conditions that they were in.
Yep.
Lots of horses have died in that area that she comes from.
Yep.
Versus G, who's a bred Andalusian, whose parents were bred and breeding animals.
Yep.
I can tell everybody there's a difference.
Oh yeah.
There's a difference in her mindset, her conformation, her feet, her digestion, her mind compared to G's.
Yep.
So I do agree with you that it's a different horse.
Oh yeah.
That we breed, and we're breeding different features.
That's right.
We're breeding different brains.
That's right. Yeah. And if you look at those horses, if you look at, say, the Mustangs that are running loose and they're feral and they're reproducing, those animals have had their own evolution.
Yes.
So if you ever actually get a Mustang, which is basically a mix of all kinds of different kinds of breeds, but they've had a survival of the fittest out there.
Yeah.
And you get one of those horses, they are sturdy as heck.
They really are.
They don't get sick. You never have to trim their feet.
Yeah, it's true.
Their teeth are okay. Their coats are okay. They're resistant to they really are. Whereas, our horses that we've bred like crazy, they're delicate as heck, and they can get a lot of disorders that we're now responsible for taking care of.
So do you believe that that's why we're seeing more colic surgeries, more metabolic? Like we're just seeing, I feel like horses are undergoing a lot more intervention than they ever did, not only because it's available and because we have more wealth that's involved with horses than there was maybe in the First World War or before that. But there feels like there's more. I mean, here we are at this world-class facility in Redmond, Washington. Pegasus is built with this has all these facilities available for so much incredible intervention.
Yep.
But I feel like Pegasus wouldn't have existed in the 30s.
Well, and I think a large part of it has to do with recognition of problems.
Right.
So between technology advancements in medicine, medications, treatments, understandings of disorders. So I think that has a ton to do with it.
Yeah.
So we're treating disorders that we wouldn't have recognized probably 10, 15 years ago. So, and our technology is keeping up. So I think part of it is we're understanding problems better and we're understanding how to treat them more appropriately. And this is what this facility here is for, is you have a problem that requires rehab, we can find a way to rehabilitate it without creating further damage.
It's amazing because there are horses here who are rehabbing out of things that I didn't even know we could rehab horses for.
Yeah.
Like I'm genuinely serious.
Yeah.
I did not know. And I've seen a lot of facilities across this continent.
Yep.
And I did not know that we could rehab some of the situations that are here.
Yeah, and they all come here. All the tough ones come here, and because they have the hyperbaric chamber, which is incredible for wounds, for post-surgery. They have the swimming facility and the hydrant horse, which is the urosizer or the water aquasizer.
Yeah.
So horses that have ligament issues, they can still stay fit. There are horses that come here just to stay fit.
Yeah.
They don't have problems.
Yeah.
But you can swim them and you won't put any pressure on their vital, ligaments and tendons. And so the facility is unbelievable.
I want to do a full 180 on that.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something that you said, because it actually brought up something that reminds me of, I went and rode with Martin Black in Idaho, and he has like thousands of acres, and it's like, as you would imagine Idaho to be, like it's barren, it's deserty, it's like extreme conditions.
Yeah.
And he said to me something that I had a hard time believing, but now that I'm hearing you, I'm thinking, you know, that's quite possible. He said that I believe him, he never had any case of colic. His horses run on thousands of acres, right? Mm-hmm. And they're they're free ranging, right? He turns a stallion out with his mares, and that's like the case for like 8 months. I think he only separates them to the short period of time, or maybe not even at all. He barely does their feet. If he said their feet are amazing. And I will attest to it. I will say that the feet I saw were like
perfect angles.
He said, and the thing that I couldn't believe is that he doesn't do teeth.
Yep.
How is that possible? As someone who's grown up in more 100 jumper barns, and like, you know, that part blew my brain. Yep. But then when I got Lady, I realized that no one, when she was running in the Southern Chilcotin range, mountain range, like no one was doing her teeth.
Yep.
Okay. So can you explain that to us too? I know we're going to talk mostly about metabolic and laminitis.
Yeah.
But I need to understand that, because when he told me that, it was like I couldn't put those two together. Yeah. How does that happen?
So the reason we do teeth, and we do suggest doing them once a year. I don't love doing teeth, but we do a ton of them, and we're really good at it. But we want to do them once a year. And we do them for 2 reasons. We do them for, well, I suppose 3 reasons, if they're abnormalities or if there's pathology in there. But one is just for eating. Pure chewing. So horses they grind in a circular motion. And if they have bumpy teeth, then they're going to not grind as efficiently.
Right.
Yeah. And so we want to flatten them out. We also want to check for sharp edges, sharp points, ramps, any abnormalities. But what you will see a lot of is wounds on the cheek or wounds on the tongue.
Which I've seen, yeah, for sure.
Yep. And so it will potentially create behavioral issues where they start throwing their heads around. Or
because
they don't want to turn. It hurts. Yeah. It hurts. And I always tell people, like, you know, I had a cap that came out once, and then it left a sharp edge on my tooth. And it was within hours that I had a wound on my tongue, maybe less. And so imagine if a horse has a wound that's been there, sometimes they're there for months, even years. So that's it. So you want to check for wounds or pain or sharp edges. You want to make sure that they have a good grinding surface, and you have to see whether there's any pathologies. Do they have loose teeth? Is there a bad odor in there? Yeah. Those kind of things.
So we should smell our horse's breath?
No, you'll be able to tell if there's a cracked tooth. So if there's a cracked tooth and there's debris that's been sitting in there, you'll smell it.
Really?
And it is one of those odors that will never go away from you. And then you get it on your hands. You can't get it off of your hands for days, no matter how much no matter.
So that's Mother Nature's way of saying, hey, everybody pay attention.
Yeah, but horses don't have great sensation in their teeth. In fact, by some accounts, they have no innervation to their teeth. So it's very common that a horse will have a cracked tooth and not know it. So it just keeps eating. Yeah. Yeah. But getting...
Is that like, that's Mother Nature's way?
I suppose there was an advantage to that.
There must be.
Yeah.
Because if we're going to talk about, which is what we're talking about, like conditions in which horses do not have to have their teeth done, where they're naturally getting that grinding and that like abrasion.
Yep. Which
if I think of abrasion with my own teeth, again, a like healthy dose of anthropomorphization here.
Yeah.
But like if I'm picturing like our teeth don't grind, if they do grind, it's painful. If we grind our own teeth, we have to wear guards because we have sensation.
We're not grinders, we're rippers and tearers.
Yeah.
Yeah. But getting back to horses and their teeth, let me tell you about this. And this is my theory alone, but I think it makes some sense. So on occasion, I will get these Mustangs that have never seen a human before, and they try to adopt these horses out. It's a problem because they reproduce too quickly. It's like we were talking about; they reproduce too quickly. But On the upside, when you get to see one up front, you truly get to see what a wild horse looks like, a feral horse, a horse that has gone through their own evolutionary process. Those horses have great feet. It means that they can travel long distances, they can cover lots of ground, and they can eat a lot of different types of feed because they can cover tons of ground. Turns out those horses don't have great teeth. In fact, they have lousy teeth.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of them have lousy teeth, which goes to show that you can survive with good feet. So if you can cover a lot of ground, you're in good shape. But if you can't cover a lot of ground, then you can't forage on a lot of acreage.
Right.
But if you can get a lot of feed into your mouth, even though your mouth isn't terribly efficient, if you're getting a lot of calories in, it's no big deal.
Then it's okay. And if you don't have a lot of sensation in your teeth.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. You can grind through all kinds of stuff.
Right.
Yeah. But if you have bad feet and you can't move, you can't cover a lot of ground, you're not going to make it. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So, but nowadays, the reason we do teeth is because we don't want behavioral issues with horses, and then we want them to be able to eat efficiently. Yeah. And it literally saves you money, because if they don't grind properly, they don't absorb as well. Part of your digestive system is your teeth. It starts up here. And so if horses don't grind properly, it means that they don't digest adequately, and so they're wasting feed, and ultimately you're losing money.
So are there environments in which horses can have, like, their teeth can be ground down naturally in a way that doesn't cause problems and doesn't require regular maintenance?
Horses are just like people. Some of them are born with great teeth, and some of them are born with terrible teeth. So,
and if the ones with good teeth are breeding, then their offspring will have
good teeth. That's right. That's right.
Makes sense.
And I'll have some, that people will tell me this horse has never had his teeth done, and he's 10 years old or 15 years old, and you braced yourself that you're going to see something terrible, and you look in there, you're like, you know what? This horse has pretty straight teeth. He's got some edges starting up, but he's just lucky he has great teeth. And then you'll see other horses that have waves and ramps, and just it's crazy. And they clearly, some horses are born with better teeth, and some are born with bad teeth, just like people.
Just like people.
Yep.
Okay. So back to our regular programming, everybody. We're going to go back to metabolic. Yes. Okay. First question I want to ask you. This concept, like, a lot of owners refer to horses as easy keepers.
Yep.
At what point does that term become like a red flag, or like something that really is referring to like a metabolic dysfunction?
About 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about 10 years ago when we recognized that easy keepers probably had a problem with regulation of insulin. And it wasn't even that long ago where just your regular labs weren't testing for insulin. You had to package it up. You had to centrifuge it at your office. You had to package it up on ice, and you had to send it to a couple of specific labs. I believe it was Cornell and Davis were the only ones were running insulin. Now all of our commercial labs run insulin. So it really was an emerging disease. So, which of course has always been present. But what we called easy keepers, I guarantee you, they truly had insulin insufficiency or insulin dysregulation. Yeah.
Okay, so let's now talk about solutions. After road tripping across Canada and the United States, I bought a horse property that came with some pretty cute ponies. Those ponies, however, were in need of more than just my love and care. They needed rehabilitation and a proven weight loss program. So I called up my friends at Pegasus to help me out. Pegasus is an equine rehabilitation and conditioning center located in Redmond, Washington, that focuses on bringing horses back into their bodies with science and intention. Each program is tailored to the individual horse with tools like an aqua treadmill, a swimming pool, turnout, and advanced therapies including stem cell support and bone scanners. With the help of the Pegasus team, I have watched my horses get stronger and fitter. Because Pegasus doesn't just rehabilitate horses, They help horses get back into work after time off. Pegasus can help take the pressure off, having to figure out everything on your own, and work with an experienced team with a clear plan. That's why I believe so deeply in what Pegasus is doing. If you're looking for that same level of support for your horse, learn more at PegasusTrainingCenter.com. Okay, so let's now talk about solutions or things that, because if you see it's more and more prevalent. And then if we start to understand that there's a connection between like regions or geographical areas or even lifestyle choices, breeds. So we have lots of things that, lots of boxes that can be ticked off by the everyday rider. So someone's listening to this podcast and they're going, cool guys, so my horse is probably a 6 or a 7, maybe an 8. What can I do? And assuming that they don't have an aqua treadmill or they don't have a walker, like what are some things what are the first things that you tell horse owners to do? And then what is the full list of things that are available to owners to address this?
So the first thing you have to recognize is your horse overweight? Does it look like it's overweight?
So get a vet to give it.
So even if the horse is not an IR horse, so insulin dysregulation horse, ID horse, even if it's not, it has the risk of becoming one as it ages and as it gets larger. So those are the risk factors. It's kind of the same as in humans. So we are think of it again as diabetes type 2, right? So if you don't exercise, and if you get older, and my mother is 90 years old and she's what they call pre-diabetic. So this insulin dysregulation is classically called pre-diabetes.
Okay.
So think of it as pre-diabetes. So one, recognize that your horse is overweight, and just having blood tests is really simple. If I think my horse is an easy keeper, this is the classic easy keepers. Most of those horses, it's actually about 15 to 25% of all our horses are probably insulin resistant or insulin dysregulation.
Wow.
And I would guess in different parts of the country, it may vary with that. We seem to have a ton of them here. And I think it's probably because we get tons of rain. And so in the springtime, our pastures are very lush.
Yes.
But also our hay that is produced a lot of times in Eastern Washington or even here in Western Washington is more lush.
Totally.
I think we also add genetic factors where we are modifying our hay and our hay production, and we're getting much richer hays. So they have higher, what are called non-structural carbohydrates. So when you go to the store, you can look at this. We'll talk about this later, but we're still talking about the flags. If the horse is overweight, I always say he gains weight. They tell me we hardly feed him anything, and he still gains weight.
Yeah.
And that's the classic horse. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say those horses that look at, like we used to say, that
look at
food and
they start gaining weight.
Those are the easy keepers.
That's right.
I.e., those are the horses that are likely
and you better check. You should check. It's a simple test. It's just a blood test. It's a blood draw. There are some more diagnostic tests that you can do, specifically a sugar tolerance test or an insulin tolerance test. But nowadays, it's so standard that we just draw insulin and glucose, and then we send them to the lab, and we get results, and we can tell you pretty quickly whether the horse is not. We can do more diagnostic tests if you want, but it's very common nowadays. It's accessible, easily accessible, and you can take further tests down the road to see how you're handling it. So classically, we've handled it with adjusting the diet. So you're going to look at the diet, and again, non-structural carbohydrates you want to have, and you can look at any of your feeds, and you're looking at less than 10%. You want low sugars, low molasses, low starch, low carbohydrates in your feed. We have a bunch of commercial feeds. These
Total Feeds,
Total
guys
Feeds
we work with. I use their low sugar, which is specifically for insulin resistant horses.
And listen, these companies They do amazing research nowadays. And so they really will specify, and they will specify within specificities, like so Purina is great, Triple Crown is great, Kentucky Research is great, Buckeye Feeds are great. This one is great. So, but you can get them specifically made.
Yeah.
So look at your diet. Get a method to weigh your feed. So your hay and your concentrates, your grains. There's a real simple way. You get on Amazon, you buy a $12 scale that you use to weigh fish.
Or luggage.
Fish or luggage.
Yep. We use it when you're traveling.
Of course, why not? I never thought of that. And then you can weigh, you can tear them now they're digital, so you can tear it, which means you zero it. Cool. And then you literally weigh your feed. And there are very specific guidelines on what is maintenance for your horse in terms of hay feed. And your different hays will have different weights. So people always measure their feed by how many flakes they give their horse. Yeah. They say, I give them 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. And you say, well, how much does that weigh? And they're like, I don't know. And then they'll do the old 1, 1.5, 2, 3. And we do that all the time. I do it myself.
Yeah, I'm totally guilty of just going off of like mass, not weight.
Yes. But it's so easy to do, and you'd be surprised at how off you are at your estimates.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then if you're overweight, you have to titrate that down. So your normal maintenance is 1.5 to 2% body weight, body mass. Okay. So say your horse is 1,000 pounds, you should be getting about 20 pounds of hay per day divided between 3 feeds.
So this requires a lot of people to know the weight of their horse.
Yeah.
Which.
Yeah.
Now, can a vet who doesn't have a scale.
Yep.
Work out the approximate weight of your horse?
Yep.
Okay.
So you pick up your horse.
Knew you were going to say.
You stand on a scale, and you look down there, and then you put the horse down, and you subtract your weight. No.
Easy.
So the weight measure, the weight tapes are actually darn efficient.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah. You just have to be consistent. So one of the things in terms of measuring, it's important that the same person does it. Mm-hmm. So, and that you put it in the same location in the horse. Okay. So, and actually, I think a lot of people, including myself, I thought I had to be kind of right up on the withers. Yeah. But you're actually looking at just behind the withers. Okay. So that's where you go, and you're coming straight down, and then you can measure. And it gives you a pretty darn accurate measurement of their weight within 50 pounds.
And that's important, because I think a lot of people feel like they can't get accurate weight if their horse doesn't have access, if you don't have access to a scale. Correct. And we've had even guests on the podcast who are Olympians or who have very high level, high performance programs who are like, oh, I weigh my horse every day. And I think a lot of guests, like a lot of listeners are like, oh, that's wonderful for you. Yeah. But like most of us can't afford a scale. I don't have a scale. Yep. So I think it's important for us all to have really accessible ways for us to know the weight of our horse, and then be able to monitor the weight of that horse, and then build our nutritional plan from the weight of the horse and then the 100%. Weight of the horse. So you're looking at 1 to 2%. Did you say
body weight, or in terms of feed, you're looking to feed approximately 2%, 1.5 to 2% body weight. Okay. In feed, and that's usually in hay and roughage. Yeah. So approximately 1,000-pound horse is going to get about 20 pounds of hay a day. And then your alfalfa is going to be weighing different potentially than your Timothy, than your orchard grass, than your local hay. Yeah. And also how compact it is will be different. That's why it's really important to weigh it. Okay. So, and the way to do it, you get a big old plastic bag, and then you hang it on your scale, and then you zero it out. Yeah. And then you can put your hay in there. And you'd be surprised at how often people are way overfeeding, or sometimes in some cases underfeeding, but that's less common.
I feel like I can think of so many examples, especially on the big road trip we just took, of examples in which I was overfeeding just because I was just like, it was a very unconscious, it was very, and I think a lot of people, especially if you've come from a high performance background or you've competed a lot and your horses were very active, and then maybe as an adult or a professional, your horses aren't as active, but you're feeding the same amount.
Yeah.
Like, I think these are really easy things to do. And I feel it's important for everybody who's listening. It's like it's much easier than people think.
Yep.
And I think it's important we don't I think it's a much more common.
Easy to overlook is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Very easy to overlook. And then when you talk about barn blindness, it's very difficult to watch your horse gain weight because it happens gradually. And so you don't notice it as much as if I come there once every 6 months or once every 3 months, I can notice it. Yeah. But so measure your horses, get a good idea of your horse's weight. Get a good idea, and you can just look up online body condition score for horses, and it'll come up and it'll give you very specific signs on what to look for, where to look for it, and then you can score your horse. And if your horse is above a 5 or a 6, you may want to look at having that horse tested. And not all overweight horses are insulin resistant, and also not all skinny horses are not insulin resistant. We'll get them that are skinny as well.
Interesting.
Yeah. But then the humongous thing that you've got to watch for is foot soreness, right?
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Now we're going to dive into this.
That's right. Yep.
Okay. First question. Laminitis is one of the most feared conditions in horse ownership. Can you explain, I want to understand the connection. I don't understand the connection between equine metabolic syndrome and laminitis.
Well, join the club because it's not terribly well understood.
Really?
Yeah, and our understanding of it is evolving as we speak, and there's still tons of research going on regarding metabolic syndrome and its association with laminitis. Good stuff. Real good research going on in Australia, Melbourne, but there's in Kentucky, they still have an annual bluegrass symposium, and it mostly is about feet and it's about laminitis.
Really?
So we understand a ton about laminitis, but we don't understand everything. And generally it's the cascade of events that happen. We know what can cause it or create it, and we know the effect or what happens in the foot. But the mechanism to how it happens is more complex.
And how it's connected to, how the two are related.
Yep. So we do know with metabolic syndrome, we do know that it's insulin. So it's literally the hormone insulin that is creating the laminitis. But we will see normal insulin should be under 50. And I think international units or something like that. And it should be under 50. We're seeing them 300, 400, 500, 900 now.
Oh, God, yeah. Thousands.
Yeah, thousands. And it turns out that the higher your insulin, the better chance you have of getting laminitis.
Okay.
So it does precipitate, the hormone itself is what is creating the laminitis. Laminitis is the separation of the hoof, the lamina, from the pedal bone, which is your coffin bone. Mm-hmm. So think if there's a glue, something has to connect it, right?
Yeah.
Something has to connect the hoof to the coffin bone. And that glue is called the lamina. And it's essentially millions of tiny scrolls that are leaflets that connect a little bit. It's kind of like an octopus where you see all of those little suckers.
Yeah.
Multiply that by 1 million, and that's what's holding on
the pedal bone.
1,000-pound horse
really
to the hoof. That's it. That's it. Now, it's to the microscopic level and it's extreme. But again, the engineering system was not, I'm not sure if these guys were from Stanford or from Yale or Harvard that designed the horse, because it's not, and that's a toenail. So think of it as your fingernail. Mm-hmm. You are standing on your fingernail, and you have the pressures of gravity, and your glue is not great. So the insulin, and there are receptors, insulin, they call them insulin-like receptors. And what happens is when those receptors are stimulated in the foot. These laminae, they stretch. And then when they stretch, obviously they're releasing. So laminitis is the inflammation of the laminae. So all of these structures that are holding the hoof to the bone.
I love this visual of like a million suckers.
A million suckers.
Holding the pedal
A billion
bone.
suckers.
A billion.
A trillion.
Yeah.
They're holding on, and all of a sudden they're all puffy. They're all puffy, and they're painful, and they're inflamed. And at some point they start dying. And all of those things create intense pain. So first you start with just the intense pain, and then at some point when all of these laminae are no longer functioning or they have been eliminated, then you're going to have sliding. So then the bone starts to rotate. You'll hear about rotating bone.
And that's what because that's what everyone talks about when they picture like the feet going underneath.
That's right. Yep. So you have a normal angle of your coffin bone, and then over here you have the hoof, and then what happens is it starts to rotate this away. Or you'll get a sinker where it sinks down. And I've seen all of them. And they're tough. And we know now that there's essentially 3 types of laminitis. There's an inflammatory laminitis. That's the one where you hear about horses got into the feed.
Okay.
So
it's like an event.
It's an event. So you know that they got into the feed, they got a carbohydrate overload, and then the response is inflammation, and then you have the risk of having laminitis. Most of our laminitis nowadays are metabolic. So they're from metabolic syndrome, they're from insulin resistance, they're from very high levels of insulin.
So they've been slowly, basically those horses, instead of an event, they've been kind of slowly walking themselves to this eventual prognosis.
And that's really an interesting question, is what triggers the event, right?
Yeah.
So if you have these high levels, say you have 900 level of insulin, and what is it that triggers the actual event, which is laminitis? Can be a pile of things, but it doesn't take much to go over the edge. And usually they had a change in exercise or training, a lot of times change in feed, so a little bit higher sugar content. And then the other type of laminitis is the contralateral laminitis, where you have a really lame right front, and so they're bearing weight on their left front.
Yes.
And eventually, and that all has to do with gravity. Horses were made to stand on 4 legs, not on 3. Yeah. And if you stand on 3 long enough, then eventually you're going to have problems with one of the heavy weight-bearing
limbs.
Yep.
And so that case of laminitis doesn't have anything to do with insulin.
Well, you could have the trifecta. You could have that as well, and they could have got into the grain as well. So you could have all 3 together.
Okay.
Yeah. But in general, they're independent of one another.
So from a medical point of view, if let's say someone's listening to this episode and they have had laminitic events, even minor ones, let's say, where they're like, there's, like, and I've seen ponies specifically who are just constantly in a case of like remission and then recurrence, recurrence.
Yep.
So are those horses just then forever compromised because the lamina is then been compromised? Or does lamina repair itself?
It regenerates.
It does regenerate.
It does.
Hey, everybody!
It does.
That's cool.
It does, and it starts from the top down. So it starts from the coronary band down. So if you have one that you are able to stabilize, which means that they're no longer in pain, in spite of having maybe radiographic evidence of it, but they're no longer in pain. Clinically, they're doing fine. They're walking, they're turning. You can lift up each leg, and they're not having problems. Yeah. Then those ones will eventually regenerate, and they can grow a whole new hoof with whole entirely new laminae.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's not one of those kind of like a ligament injury where it repairs with scar tissue and then it's never as strong. You can literally have feet regenerate to exactly what they were before. It's not easy.
No.
And it takes a really long time, and it takes a special horse.
Yeah.
And a special owner.
Yeah. That's because
but you can't.
That's a big commitment.
Yeah.
Like typically owners
It's
have to
usually
do
a
quite
year.
a lot of extreme things, usually a year.
It's a year for a horse's foot to grow from the coronary band to the ground.
bottom. Yeah.
It's 6 months to a year. Yeah.
And is that why, and this might be totally unrelated.
Yeah. Might be fun though. Let's do it.
Is this why you can map out events in a horse's life?
Yeah.
On their feet?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
So everybody, okay, can you explain that to everyone?
It's
Because
less
I
fun.
didn't know that until I got lots of different horses with different health histories that I was able to map when an event took place in their life and what we were working with and what I could expect in terms of just even rehabilitating their feet.
Yeah. Yeah, you get about a year of history on the foot, and it's not as fun as the rings on a tree, especially a 1,000-year-old tree, because then you can see you can kind of trace what the weather was like. But it's kind of the same with horses. You can trace what the weather was like. Mostly, you can see if there was a foot event, something that affected the foot. And you will see...
Which could be a laminitic or pre-laminitic event.
Correct. Or they got sick, they got ill, or they were in really bad conditions where they were in terms of mud, in terms of diet, because everything should be consistent. Everything should be growing consistent, and the rings should be growing out consistently as well. So if you get these big gaps between the rings, big unusual ring growth, or you get one area that has very poor growth, then they usually had an event at that time.
So interesting.
Yeah.
It's like, I've said this so many times, the more you learn, the more you know what to look for.
Yeah.
It's amazing what we're blind to.
Yeah.
And as someone, even people who have spent their whole life with horses and you don't know how to read, or you don't know, and that information isn't as accessible maybe.
Yep.
And that's a big thing that we struggle with in the horse industry is how accessible this information is, which is a lot of one big reason why this podcast exists, is what we don't see.
Yep.
And then when you see it, can't
That's right in front of you.
Yeah.
That's right in front of you.
Okay, so as we kind of wrap this journey of equine metabolic syndrome and laminitis, I really want everyone who's listening or watching to really walk away from this episode with not only a ton of tools, but a lot of hope, and also feel empowered with the tools and the things that they can do. So you mentioned before that there are signs of laminitis that people can look for. There are red flags that are big flags that we can look for that are going to help and cause a lot of prevention. Or could cause a lot of prevention.
And remind me about the take homes of this talk, because I think prior treatment methods, which were still pretty good, and then prior medications that we use for obese horses or EMS horses or equine metabolic syndrome horses, and the current medications that are out that are pretty incredible.
Actually, let's talk about that before we talk about
laminitis.
Red flags for laminitis.
That's
because
easy.
I actually want to talk about that.
I don't want to forget about those things.
Okay, let's talk about the medications available for insulin. Because I have questions, even myself. We're going to talk about all the meds. But I want to talk about medications that specifically address and help horses that are showing signs of insulin resistance. So they're kind of teetering on that. They're in that equine metabolic syndrome parameter. And we're wanting to help them with their insulin metabolism. I guess, would I say insulin metabolism or?
Or the insulin regulation or their insulin sensitivity.
Cool.
So historically, we've treated these horses with exercise, adjusting their diet. And then we've had some not terribly effective medications, specifically metformin, which is the medication people get on as a pre-diabetic medication. It helps to properly store or properly process glucose. Doesn't work that great. Thyro-L is the other one, which is thyroid medication. Somebody told me at one point, they're like, hyperthyroid must be the best disease you can get because you're skinny. and so yeah, and so the theory is because if you're hypothyroid, you tend to be overweight, or dogs specifically get overweight.
Yeah.
So people feel that if they're going to be hyperthyroid, if you ever seen a hyperthyroid cat, they're very skinny and they're very hyperactive.
I have a hypothyroid dog.
Yeah, and so they tend to be footstooly. They can tend to get pretty round.
She's actually
until you treat
super
her.
Skinny. But she's an Anatolian, so she's like that's. And then I never had an animal with the hypothyroidism,
which is a great example that they don't all follow the standard guidelines,
right?
Because she's supposed to be a pretty footstooly, round dog. So at any rate, so exercise, adjusting the diet, and then there are a few medications that we've tried in the past. And listen, we dealt with this syndrome through exercise and medications as necessary, and now treating them or doing repetitive blood tests. So we have some pretty amazing medications that are out now. They're called SGLT1s. Remarkably effective.
Yeah.
Like stunningly. Like I don't know any other medication that we can quantify an improvement as well as these.
Wow.
Here's the downside. They're expensive.
Right.
So for an average adult horse, you're looking at about $400 to $500 a month to treat these guys.
Yeah.
Two is we don't have long-term studies on these products on horses.
So you don't understand the long-term effects.
What's going to happen 5 years if your horse is on it for 5 years or 10 years? And the recommendation now is that they shouldn't be on it for life because it can affect their livers. So you're supposed to be checking their livers, their liver enzymes and their triglycerides. You should be checking. I will say that none of the horses I've seen had any problems. So it's kind of like when you see one of those big pharma commercials on TV and they give you all of the side effects, potential side effects, and you're like, well, I'll take it anyways.
You're like, could cause death or heart attack or stroke or brain aneurysm
or
whatever.
Bad breath or hearing difficulties. Yeah, and you're like, okay, I'm going to try it. And it turns out you don't get any of those symptoms.
True. Yeah,
they just have to. So that's kind of what we've noticed. I've also noticed that some of them we have been able to titrate down to a lower dose.
Oh, cool.
And they still maintain those insulin levels that are low.
Well, it may be a powerful combination that if people are in certain...
Right.
Like, I'm thinking just having that as a tool in your toolbox, you don't have to use it.
Yep.
But knowing, let's say, I don't know, like lots of women who listen to this podcast, they're getting pregnant or they're having kids.
Yep.
So their horse might not be super active for a year.
Yep.
If that horse is an easy keeper, has certain tendencies, then at least they have that in their toolbox in case they're like, hey, my horse is really not going to get that much physical activity for the next 18 months.
Yep.
And that's just a reality.
Yep.
So you can be preventative, which I think is really powerful.
Well, think of it, and I think we talked about it. So all these GLP-1 medications, Ozempic, anyways, and we're heading that way in horses. There's no question that we're not. It's going to happen.
So do you think there's going to be an Ozempic for horses?
100%. 100%. It may take 5-10 years, or so first of all, the prices are going to change, right? And then they will probably, why wouldn't you? We're doing it. We're mimicking. So sometimes the human medicine side mimics our side, specifically in our digital x-rays, our hyaluronic acid in joints. So all of the medications are biologics that we put in joints. But it's definitely heading that way.
Yeah, wasn't PRP done on horses first?
Well, 100%, yeah. Stem cell, now there's alpha-2 globulin or what, So,
but sometimes we're behind. Our industry is obviously like a ripple effect behind what's happening with humans.
Correct. No, we're ahead. So a lot of times we're ahead, and the human side is copying us.
But then you think when it comes to weight loss or things like that, then it'll be...
Just like we said, we're mimicking, our horse population is mimicking our human population.
Right.
So there's no reason to think that we're not going to develop the medications for those horses. So at any rate, it's just like our human population. You can actually lose weight by adjusting your diet and by exercising, not having to take Ozempic or one of those medications.
Right.
And it's the same with horses. It turns out you have to really exercise those horses, and most people don't have the ability to do that.
Well, and I'm thinking also certain breeds have a higher, what I would call that higher threshold.
Without question, there's predisposing breeds without question.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the horses that are harder to exercise are some people that they cannot exercise.
Yeah, they don't have the facilities.
No. But the sweet part, or that's a retired person or their children. But so the sweet spot is about 30 minutes of hard exercise, 5 to 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that will make a significant difference, but it turns out that's a lot.
Yeah.
Not most of our horse populations don't do
is
that.
not going and I think that's where we see those big extremes in our industry, right?
Yep.
Where we see horses that are being pushed to their physical capacity,
Yep.
and they're either professional athletes,
Yep.
or they're being pushed to a point that maybe they're not actually physically able to maintain.
Yep.
And then that's a whole other different discussion. Or there's just like underutilization, under physical activity, like just a fundamental underuse or under activity. And then obviously there's everyone in the middle who we don't really hear from.
Yep.
Right. Because they're just kind of that would probably be the happy middle.
Yep.
Right. Where they're physically active, but they're not being overused.
Yep.
And I think that's what I would say the large percentage of us as a horse collective should be aiming for.
Yep.
Is not this extreme being the Michael Phelps of horses, but also not needing Ozempic.
Yep. Yeah.
Somewhere in between.
Yeah. That's ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing is the symptoms of laminitis. This is the other thing now. Using these products preventively.
Yes.
Right? So here's a myth. My horse has a cresty neck and it's getting firm. It's really hard. And that means that my horse has laminitis. It absolutely does not, but I have had many people that have panicked because they felt their horse's crest and it was firm to them, and they equated that to laminitis.
I think I think that's important. I certainly, when I felt a crusty neck on the horse that I had adopted, I kind of freaked out.
Yep. And you shouldn't freak out. That's rule number one.
Okay.
Always, regardless.
Yeah.
Don't freak out. But does not mean your horse has laminitis. It just means your horse is predisposed to it just because it's overweight. And if we based on our discussion, if he's overweight, he probably has high insulin levels, and high insulin levels predisposes to laminitis.
Well, and also and this is bringing back to Bella and Ginger as an example. Also, don't assume that your fattest horse will have the highest insulin levels.
Right.
Because if you had looked at these two ponies, you would have guaranteed that Bella was through the roof.
I would have guessed her over 900. Yeah.
Yeah. And she wasn't.
Yeah.
I think she was I think she was
in the 150 range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bella was I want to say Bella was what? Was she? She was definitely in the hundreds. I thought she was
she wasn't that high because I would have remembered.
Maybe I just trauma remember.
Yeah. They were surprisingly not that high.
As high as you would think looking at their body condition.
Correct. And this is a great example because now we're looking at, are we going to use it preventively?
Yes.
And I did have a client recently ask me, they were concerned about their horse. They had just done random blood test, not random, but just an annual blood test. And they had included insulin because everybody now is aware of this condition. And it was a little high. It was in 100 range.
Yeah.
And now that I'm seeing him in the 8, 9, 600, 700, 800 levels, I'll take 100 all day long. But that truly means that you have insulin dysregulation if it's over 50, even fasted or non-fasted, morning or not. So the question was, should I put her on this medication and preventively? So it's expensive. You have the potential side effects of liver toxicity, and we don't have long-term studies on what it's going to do to your horse.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a crapshoot. Are we going to start? And do we start talking about microdosing?
Oh.
If we start talking about a teeny dose, and we monitor it over time to see whether
that's interesting.
Levels,
because we microdose chemotherapy for dogs.
And we microdose the Ozempic and all those medications.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I think
and that's where we need more research, or we need more studies, or more understanding.
And I think that's so important that everyone who's listening or watching this episode is going to walk away with not only a clear understanding of the physiology and the biology of these conditions, but also that you have multiple solutions that you can talk to, preventative measures that you can talk to your vet about.
Yeah.
And what I love is, like, I would say one of the big, like, hey, if there's one thing you take out of this episode is maybe an annual blood test to be able to track what is your horse's baseline, and are you seeing spikes?
100%.
I feel so excited for everyone, including myself, because throughout this episode, not only have I feel like I'm more informed for now all of the horses that I have that are like would be within the like high probability of developing equine metabolic syndrome, and then if gone unmanaged, likely to develop laminitis, not because of like already just with the nature of their constitution or their breeding. So I think it's super powerful that a lot of us feel that we can be preventative, because I do sometimes feel as though the conversations in the past or the mentality in the past has been should be reactive, to be like, okay, look for the signs and then respond. Look for the signs, be responsive. And I think there's a huge opportunity for us to be preventative, especially if you can classify your horses. Okay, my horse is, like on a scale of 1 to 10, probably an 8 out of 10 likely, if I don't manage that horse correctly, to develop insulin difficult, like challenges in their insulin metabolism.
And so the take homes, right, which we were going to discuss. So let's start from the very beginning.
Let's start from the top.
Go with your body condition score.
Yeah.
All right. Assess your horse. Is that horse over a 5 out of 9? Okay. And you can very easily download a body condition score, BCS, and it'll tell you exactly where it is. Get yourself a measuring tape so you can measure that guy. 2, get yourself a scale so you can measure how much feed you're giving your horse.
And knowing your horse's weight so that you can accurately feed based on their weight.
100%.
Which is 1.5% to 2% of their body weight.
Correct. And then you'll reduce that by 20 or 30% based on their weight. And then you're going to keep checking their
based
weight.
On their body score if they have to lose weight.
Exactly. And then based on their improvement, then you're going to adjust the diet as necessary. But you'll be surprised at how much off you are, or how, and then are they being turned out because they're getting a lot of nutrition and they're getting a lot of potential carbs from the pasture as well. So, and
I think I want to mention, because this is something that I'm going to use, and I think we need to maybe remove the stigma around this, is grazing muzzles. If you don't have solutions of dry paddocks, or you want for, your own preference for horses to get some grazing time, then grazing muzzles are, I think, a good potential opportunity or solution for people who want to have that grazing time for their horses.
You're an alternative. You will run into some vets that will prohibit horses from ever grazing on pasture ever again in their lives, which is crazy, right? Because that's what horses were supposed to do. But also the time of day. So if you go in the late afternoon, evening is better than early morning. I'm sorry, other way around. Early morning is better. Sunshine,
the sugars,
photosynthesis.
Rays are
photosynthesis.
We talked about this in my episode with Dr. Gary Anderson. It's this idea of where the sugar is placed in the stem of the grass. So higher, at night is actually ideal. So if everyone's comfortable turning your horses on at night, that's really the better. The horses that are really like susceptible to equine metabolic syndrome or laminitis, or have had laminitic events or whatever, those horses really shouldn't be going out in the day, because that's when the sugar is highest in the grass.
You got it. You already got it. You already got it.
Thanks to Harry.
You already got it. Good job, Harry. But so, okay, get your body condition score. Weigh your feed. Get that. Have your horse blood tested if you're at all concerned. If it's a once a year. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Do a full blood panel and do an insulin, glucose. You might as well throw an ACTH for pituitary problems, which is another story. And then recognize the symptoms, right? Recognize the symptoms of laminitis specifically.
And equine metabolic.
And in the equine, which is the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So recognize what the symptoms are.
Mhm.
My horse is overweight. He's lethargic. He gains weight without me doing anything.
Yeah.
And he seems real tender on his feet, too. I'm not sure why. So if you have all of those things, then talk to your veterinarian and have him blood tested for sure.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So we wrap up every episode with a series of questions, which I'm really excited to ask you.
All right.
And as a vet, we have a slightly modified version for our vets and for our equine health experts. Okay, if you could read one book to the horse world, what would it be?
Yeah. I was reading a book called The Horse, which is a real interesting book about a racehorse, kind of at the turn of the century. It's just a good historical fiction about horses and about our society. So it has to do with kind of the conversion of slavery at the time to, and the horses were raced in really crazy ways before.
Yeah.
So they would run 2 to 4 miles and then they would do it again the next day. So it's just a fascinating book. I suppose The Horse would be a good book to read.
Love that.
Yep.
Who do you think is the most iconic horse in history?
Secretariat.
Oh.
You can see I have
I like it.
Racehorse.
You have a
leads,
racehorse, you're
Yep.
racehorse adjacent.
Yep.
Most undervalued skill as a horse owner?
I think it's handling horses. So restraint. And I don't mean in a bad way. I mean, because I don't like things like twitches, those kind of disciplinary systems. I think restraint in that and safety. So people being in the right place, standing in the right place, not surprising horses, knowing what's going to make horses explode, or when you're in situations of risk. I think that's the biggest deal, is to be safe around them.
Who is the greatest horse practitioner or horse health mind in history?
I don't know. That means
Like, could be a vet, could be someone who contributed to research in a way.
the funny thing, and it's only because it's right on we've been talking about, it was this Robert Miller, which is kind of crazy. First of all, he's a great speaker. Second of all, he was just groundbreaking research on this imprinting.
Concept of imprinting.
Yeah, which, whether or not it's a good thing or not, it was groundbreaking. We've never seen anything like it before.
Yeah.
And he's also a cartoonist. I don't know if you knew that.
He's a fascinating individual.
Yep. So it may not be an appropriate answer, but that's the person that I think of right now.
Amazing.
Yeah. And he's one of the reasons why I don't like using twitches in horses, which is a common restraint technique, because he very logically explained at one of the seminars that I went, that the reason it works is because of sheer pain.
Yes.
Yeah.
The distracting aspect of fundamental sheer pain.
It's 100% sheer pain. And we like to say that it's endorphin release because it makes us feel better, but endorphins take at least 30 seconds to kick in, whereas this is instantaneous. And it's no different than holding somebody's ear, and you're going to be able to do things. So I don't like using them. Plus, I've seen some horrible injuries to people from them. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And the last question is, mares, stallions, or geldings?
Geldings.
I knew you were going to say that.
Geldings.
What a great place to finish.
Good stuff.
Dr. Tooman, thank you so much for coming on.
It was my pleasure. And we talked a lot, probably more than I should have, but
It's okay. It happens a lot.
Yes. All right.